For Creamer Media's Polity, I'm Shannon. I'm with political analyst JP Landman, who is discussing labour law in South Africa. A groundbreaking wage agreement was struck in South Africa's clothing and textile industry recently. Can you tell us about that, as well as the far-reaching consequences of the agreement?
Shannon, the agreement basically stipulates that wages for newcomers in the industry can drop by 30% in the urban areas and 20% in the rural areas for newcomers coming into the industry. Now, what is a newcomer? It is somebody that hasn't ever worked in the industry, or somebody that hasn't worked in the industry for a period of 3 years. They are regarded as newcomers. And when you appoint them, when an employer appoints them, he can pay them 30% and 20% respectively, less than the minimum wage. But in exchange for that, the employers must create 5,000 jobs, 5,000 new jobs, between now and the end of 2014, basically over the next 3 years. If at the end of 2014 the 5,000 jobs have not been created, then in theory at least that 30% and 20% wage discount will fall away. Wages will move back again to the minimum levels, and that will be the new status quo. The employers are, from press reports, confident that they can create the 5,000 jobs, which means the agreement should hold. Now, why is it an important agreement? Well, first of all, as you know, there's a huge fight between COSATU and the rest of society about the introduction of a wage subsidy for young people coming into the workplace for the first time. And COSATU is vociferously against this. But the Textile Workers Union is also a big COSATU union. So a union makes an agreement that gives special allowance to newcomers, and COSATU, the overall federation, is against it. I think COSATU's position has been undermined, has been compromised. And this is certainly, the agreement is certainly a good boost, or a strong boost for the wage subsidy. So that's the one consequence. The other consequence, which I think is important, in South Africa, in spite of what we sometimes say, collective bargaining is not a one-way street. All the power doesn't sit with the trade unions. Employers also have power.
Yes.
They've got 50% of the power. They're half the bargaining unit, or the bargaining council rather. Now, if the employer feels strongly enough about something, and they have a strong enough vision, and they have a strong enough power in their punch, they can actually negotiate this kind of agreement. That's what the clothing and textile employers have now proven. Hopefully it'll be a trailblazer for other employers to follow suit.
You mentioned that the agreement will fall apart if employers use it to retrench older, more experienced workers earning higher wages to employ younger, cheaper ones. What is the likelihood of this occurring, and what effect could it have on the industry?
Look, there are always a few spoil sports who can't see the big picture and who try and take shortcuts. So I think one must expect it can happen. I'm not saying it will, but it can. Hopefully the sanction or the criticism from other employers will be strong enough to keep these few errant people online. And if they stay on board and people more or less stick to the agreement, the thing can work.
You say that the industrial relations system in South Africa is deeply embedded in our political DNA. It is part of our political psyche. Please elaborate on this statement.
Well, if you think about it, collective bargaining as we know it today basically was introduced in 1924. It's almost 100 years ago, more than three quarters of a century. It was introduced by the old Afrikaner government of General Hertzog, and throughout all the changes that we've had over 3/4 of a century, the system more or less remained intact. Yes, Tito Mboweni in the ANC did make changes after '94, but the basic structure, the basic framework of employers on the one hand and employees on the other hand, employees represented by a trade union, employers represented by an employer organization, and they come together and they co-determine what happens with wages and so on. That is a very old system. I can't see the South African body politic just walking away from this. For starters, what else do you do? You know, what is the alternative? Do you not talk to people about wages? Well, forget it. I mean, the world doesn't work like that. Do employers just unilaterally set wages? Well, in many cases you can, but increasingly you can't. So it's something which can't just be abolished overnight. It's something which can't just be chucked out and say, okay, we're now finished with this. We no longer apply the rules of collective bargaining. Collective bargaining comes with a modern economy. It comes with the more manufacturing you have, the more trade unions and bargaining you will have. The more mining you have, the more trade unions and bargaining you will have. Increasingly you also see in services that collective bargaining takes place. And union membership goes up and it goes down, but collective bargaining doesn't disappear. It's part of the way that people run their lives. And that's what I mean if I say it's part of our psyche.
If one looks on job websites or in newspapers, there seem to be countless jobs available. Yet the majority of South Africa's youth under the age of 24 are unemployed. What is the main problem?
Well, in spite of all the adverts that you see, there's still many more people looking for jobs. So for every one advert that you read or one advert you see, there are probably 50 or 60 people still looking for a job. 30, 40, 50 people applying perhaps for that one single job. So it's simply a question of numbers. For all the adverts that you see, there are many more people looking for jobs. I think it would also be fair to say that we have a lot of vacancies in our economy. We don't know how many, we don't count them. But we have vacancies because the education and training system do not produce the kind of skills that employers can always use. So I think it's a combination of those two things. Simply many more people looking for jobs than available jobs, and a misfit between the job and the skills available.
Do you think it's also a case of perhaps not necessarily a new job becoming available, but rather, say, an emigration, so that same job is available, there's not necessarily a new one being added to it?
Oh, absolutely. You know, people retire, people resign, people emigrate, people go to other employers. I mean, there are 1,000 reasons why you can have vacancies in the labor force. And then and that's why you see the adverts.
The latest Stats SA report, titled Labour Market Dynamics in South Africa 2010, reveals some remarkable and sobering statistics about jobs in South Africa. Can you briefly tell us about this?
Well, the one that struck me most is the fact that the median wage, now median is not average, what it means is that 50% of people earn more and 50% of people earn less. That the median wage in South Africa is 2,900 Rand a month. You know, that is not even 36,000 Rand a year. It's an astonishingly low number. From that, people must still pay transport, they must still get to work before they can actually start earning the money. So that was for me the most remarkable number in that survey. The second thing that stood out in the survey was the large number of people in our labour force who do not enjoy the benefits that we normally associate with employment. For example, something like 54% of employees do not contribute to a pension fund. 68%, 2/3, do not enjoy medical aid benefits. Something like more than 40% of women are in jobs where they do not have maternity benefits. Now, we take these things for granted, and we assume that when a person has a job and there's a union around, then employees would automatically have these benefits. Well, clearly a lot of them don't. And that tells us something, Shannon, about how fragmented the South African labour market is. You know, some people tend to think the labour market is one whole big thing. It works very well. People come in at the bottom and they work themselves up and they earn the wage that they should get, and everything is... It is not as well organized as that. It is fragmented. You can break it up into different components. People can't necessarily move from the one section of the labour market to another. And I think that's the kind of picture that one gets from this labour market dynamics report.
Now, also, if you mentioned that they're earning not even 36,000 Rand a year, then they're not taxed.
Well, not direct taxes, but of course, remember in South Africa, everybody that has money is taxed because you pay VAT, yes, and you pay petrol taxes and so on, yeah, but not personal income tax, sure.
So then also that creates some problems for government then?
Well, government would certainly like to have more taxpayers, yes, absolutely, and if you can have more people earning more money, you can collect more money, sure, absolutely. Yeah. Now,
you reject as simplistic the idea that it is only COSATU that is blocking changes to the labour laws. Please elaborate on this.
Yeah, I feel quite strongly about that. We must just go back in history. In 2007, the Mbeki government wanted to deregulate the labour market and made some changes. The idea was floated inside the ANC and it went absolutely nowhere. So the majority of people inside the ANC itself, quite apart from COSATU, is against the idea that you should have more jobs by taking away protection for the people who currently enjoy protection. Now, if you think about that number of 36,000 Rand, then you can understand why. People are saying, why should people who earn less than 36,000 Rand a year, why should their wages drop further so that you create jobs for other people? It's not a very saleable proposition. So what we tend to say is just COSATU recalcitrance. I think it tells you something about the broader South African body politic, saying no, We don't want to have this particular road as a road to create jobs. That's the way I read it.
How can we create jobs?
Well, economic growth is the most important one. And where you can't have economic growth, which we're now struggling with, you will have to do it with things like a wage subsidy. You will have to do it with the jobs fund, which the government has launched. You will have to try and subsidize industries that create jobs in a big way. And lastly, you must accept that a lot of South Africans will never work. So you've got to give them jobs in things like a public works program, which is not a job in the normal sense of the word, but it is a poverty relief measure.
Yes.
It is something where the man can go once or twice a week, do up some work, earn a wage. You know, it's a modest introduction into a modern economy. But they will never have a full-time job in the way that you and I understand the term.
It seems very sad, but maybe things can come right.
Well, you know, in time it will, but we're sitting with a demographic overhang. In the 90s, particularly, we had a huge influx of young people into the labour market. That hasn't tapered off yet. It's beginning to taper off, but we're still sitting with that, with the tail end of that demographic change. And that is what is causing the unemployment problem. And it will take a while to clear it out.
So we just have to hope that people can come up with new ideas and create their own businesses, which will need then employment, and go from there.
Yes, yes, that kind of thing, yeah.
Well, thank you very much. It was fascinating to speak with you.
My pleasure.